You know that frantic, heart-pounding, stomach-dropping panic when you're late for work. The kids are screaming, and you can't find your keys for the last year. That gut-wrenching panic had become my permanent state of being. I was constantly losing everything. My keys, my phone, my wallet, my security badge for work, and every single time. After minutes of frantic, tearful searching, my husband, Tom, would swoop in like a patient, gentle hero, and find them for me, always with a sad, pitying little smile. "Oh, honey," he'd say, pulling my car keys out of the sugar canister. "You're just so stressed. Your job is running you ragged. You're becoming so forgetful." And the worst part, the most terrifying part, I was starting to believe him. If you've ever felt like you were slowly losing your mind, like your own brain was betraying you, then you need to hear this story, because I wasn't losing my mind. I was being gaslit. My name is Emily, and on paper, I had it all. A loving husband, 2 beautiful young children, and a demanding but rewarding career as a hospital administrator. It was a high-stress, high-stakes job, and I juggled it all: the budgets, the staffing, the late-night emergencies, with a level of competence and organization that I was proud of. At work, I was a respected, efficient professional. But at home, I was a mess, a complete and total disaster. The problem had started slowly, almost imperceptibly. A misplaced phone here, a lost set of keys there. At first, I chalked it up to mom brain, the foggy, exhausted state that comes with trying to raise 2 children under the age of 5 while also holding down a full-time job. Tom, my husband, was always so understanding. "It's okay, sweetheart," he'd say, rubbing my back as I frantically tore the house apart, looking for my wallet. "You have a lot on your plate. It's normal to be a little scatterbrained." But over the past year, it had gotten worse, so much worse. It had gone from an occasional annoyance to a daily, humiliating ritual. Every single morning was a frantic, stressful scavenger hunt for the essential items I needed to just leave my own house. "Has anyone seen my phone?" I'd call out, my voice already tight with a rising panic as I looked at the clock. And the search would begin. The kids would start to cry. I'd be late for work. And Tom, my calm, steady Tom, would watch the chaos with a look of weary, patient sympathy. He would let me search for 10, 15 minutes, until I was on the verge of a complete breakdown. And then, and only then, would he miraculously find the missing item. "Oh, here it is, honey," he'd say, pulling my phone out from inside the freezer. "You must have put it in here when you were getting the milk out for the kids' cereal. You've just got to slow down." I had no memory of putting my phone in the freezer, but I was so tired, so stressed, so overwhelmed. I must have. Who else could have done it? He was so convincing. His concern seemed so genuine. He would never get angry. He would just sigh, a deep, sorrowful sound, and look at me with his kind, pitying eyes. "I'm worried about you, Em," he'd say, pulling me into a hug. "You're burning yourself out. You can't keep going like this. You're going to have a breakdown." And I started to believe him. I started to see myself through his eyes. At work, I was a confident, competent administrator who managed a multi-million-dollar budget. But at home, I was a scatterbrained, incompetent wreck who couldn't even keep track of her own keys. The two realities were so different. I felt like I was splitting into 2 different people. My self-esteem plummeted. I began to doubt my every move, my every decision. I would triple-check my purse before I left a room. I put a bright, obnoxious keychain on my keys so they would be harder to lose. But they would still vanish, only to be found by Tom in the dog's toy basket or tucked inside a Russian nesting doll in the living room. I started to feel dependent on him. He was the calm one, the organized one, the one who always had to rescue me from my own failing mind. I leaned on him, I clung to him, and I hated myself for it. I hated feeling so incompetent. The situation was building to a crisis. I was in the middle of preparing for the hospital's annual budget presentation to the board of directors. It was the biggest, most important project of my career. I had been working on it for months, late nights and weekends, and the stress was immense, which, of course, only seemed to make my forgetfulness worse. The night before the big presentation, I was a nervous wreck. I laid everything out for the next morning with the precision of a military operation. I put my presentation notes, my security badge, and my wallet in my work bag. I put my phone on its charger by the bed, and I took my car keys and I placed them deliberately, consciously, in the small ceramic bowl by the front door where they were always supposed to go. I even took a mental picture of them sitting there. Not tomorrow, I whispered to myself. Tomorrow, I will not lose anything. I felt a small, fragile sense of control. As I was getting into bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. He was downstairs, watching TV. "Good luck tomorrow, honey." The text read, "You're going to be amazing. Try not to be too stressed. And don't forget where you put your keys." The winky face emoji was like a small, final, condescending jab. But I ignored it. I was prepared. I was organized. Tomorrow would be different. I had no idea that tomorrow would be the day that my entire, carefully constructed reality would come crashing down around me. I had no idea that my husband's concern was actually a campaign of psychological warfare. And I had no idea that my forgetfulness was the key to a betrayal so deep, it would almost destroy me. I woke up the morning of my big presentation before my alarm even went off, my stomach a tight, churning knot of anxiety. The presentation to the hospital's board of directors was the culmination of a 6-month project. A new efficiency initiative that I had designed and was championing. It was my baby. My career depended on it. But my first thought wasn't about the presentation. It was, where are my keys? I felt a surge of relief as I remembered my meticulous preparation the night before. My work bag was packed by the door. My presentation was loaded onto a flash drive in the front pocket. And my keys, my elusive, constantly vanishing car keys, were safely in the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. I had checked. I had double-checked. I had taken a mental photograph. Today would be different. Today, I would be in control. I went through my morning routine with the precision of a surgeon. I got the kids up, fed them their breakfast, packed their lunches. Everything was going smoothly. Tom was still asleep, a luxury he could afford with his more flexible work-from-home schedule. At 7:30 a.m., dressed in my best power suit, my confidence building, I walked to the front door to grab my keys. The bowl was empty. I stared at it for a long, silent moment, my brain refusing to process the information. It was impossible. They were there. I knew they were there. I had seen them there. "Okay," I whispered to myself, a frantic edge already creeping into my voice. "Don't panic. You just put them somewhere else. Retrace your steps." I started the familiar, hated dance first, the logical places. I checked the pockets of the coat I had worn yesterday. Nothing. I checked my purse, emptying its entire contents onto the floor. Nothing. I checked the kitchen counter, the bathroom counter, the top of the washing machine. Nothing. The panic began to rise, hot and suffocating. The clock was ticking. I was going to be late. I moved on to the illogical places, the bizarre hiding spots where Tom had found my things before. I opened the freezer, my heart pounding. I plunged my hand into the sugar canister. I checked inside the dog's toy basket. Nothing. 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 The commotion finally woke Tom. He emerged from the bedroom, yawning and stretching, the very picture of sleepy, domestic calm. "Honey," he asked, his brow furrowing with concern as he took in the scene of me frantically tearing the house apart. "What's wrong?" "My keys," I cried, my voice now a high-pitched, desperate sound. "I can't find my keys. They were in the bowl. Tom, I know they were, and now they're gone." He sighed, a deep, sorrowful sound of a man burdened by his wife's incompetence. "Oh, he said, shaking his head slowly. "Not today. Not on the day of your big presentation. You've got to be more careful. The stress is really getting to you." He began his helpful routine, which consisted of following me around the house as I retraced my steps for the 10th time, offering a running commentary of condescending sympathy. "Did you check your work bag?" he'd ask, even though he had just watched me empty it onto the floor. "Maybe you left them in the car last night," he'd suggest, knowing full well I couldn't get into the car without them. "Just calm down, honey," he'd say, trying to rub my shoulders as I frantically searched under the sofa cushions. "You're getting yourself all worked up. You won't be able to think clearly if you're hysterical. His calmness only made me more frantic. I was losing my mind. I was really, truly losing my mind. I finally collapsed onto the sofa, my body shaking with sobs of pure frustration and self-loathing. I was a failure, a scatterbrained, incompetent mess who couldn't even handle the simple task of keeping track of her own keys. I can't do this, Tom. I wept into my hands. You're right, I'm losing it. I know I put them in the bowl now that I was completely broken, now that I had fully surrendered to his narrative of my own incompetence. He made his move. Okay, sweetheart, he said, his voice a soothing, gentle balm. Let me just look one more time. You probably just overlooked them in your panic. He walked calmly through the living room. He didn't check any of the bizarre places. He just walked over to the fireplace mantelpiece. He reached behind a framed photo of our 2 children. Well, look at that, he said, his voice full of a gentle, pitying surprise. He held up the keys, dangling them from his finger. Here they are, honey, right here in plain sight. You were just so worked up you couldn't see them. I stared at the keys, then at the photo. I had searched that mantelpiece. I had searched it 3 times. I would have sworn on my own children's lives that they had not been there. But there they were. The humiliation was absolute. It was so complete. It erased my anger, leaving only a deep, profound sense of shame. I was late. My makeup was ruined from crying. My confidence was shattered. I snatched the keys from his hand without a word and ran out the door. I made it to my presentation with only 2 minutes to spare. A disheveled, wild-eyed mess. The presentation itself was a blur. I got through it. But it wasn't my best work. My mind was still back at home, replaying the frantic search, replaying the look of pity on my husband's face. I drove home that afternoon feeling like a complete and total failure, the near disaster with my career. The public confirmation of my own incompetence was the final straw. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't trust my own mind. And in that moment of absolute rock-bottom despair, a new, desperate idea began to form. I needed an impartial witness. I needed a silent, unblinking eye that could tell me the truth, that could tell me if I was truly going crazy, or if something else, something far more sinister, was happening in my own home. I didn't drive straight home. I drove to an electronics store, and I bought a Nanny cam. I bought the Nanny cam feeling like a paranoid, unhinged spy in my own life. I chose the smallest one they had, a discreet little black cube that could be easily hidden, as I paid for it in cash. A hot wave of shame washed over me. What kind of person spies on their own family? What kind of wife is so convinced she's losing her mind that she needs a machine to be her memory? The woman I saw in the reflection of the electronics store window was a stranger to me, a tired, anxious woman with fear in her eyes. I smuggled it into the house like it was contraband. That evening, I had to present my cover story to Tom. My heart was pounding, certain he would see right through me. Hey, honey, I began, my voice a little too bright as I pulled the camera out of the box. My coworker, Jennifer, just got one of these to check on her kids with their new nanny. I thought it was such a smart idea, you know? Just for peace of mind when we have a babysitter over. What do you think? He looked at the camera, and his face broke into a warm, loving smile. It was a smile of such pure, condescending approval that it almost made me sick. That is a fantastic idea, he said, his voice full of admiration. See, you're being so proactive and organized. This is a really good, responsible step. I'm proud of you for thinking of it. He had no idea. He thought I was buying a baby monitor. I was actually installing a witness. He even helped me set it up, his strong, capable hands connecting it to our home Wi-Fi network. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. Where should we put it? He asked, looking around the living room. How about up here? I suggested, my voice carefully casual. I pointed to the top of our tall bookshelf, a spot partially obscured by a decorative vase, but with a perfect, wide-angle view of the entire living room, the front door, and most importantly, the entryway table with the small ceramic bowl where my keys were supposed to live. Perfect, he said, and he was the one who climbed the small stepladder to place the silent, unblinking eye in its new home. The first few days of reviewing the footage were some of the most humiliating of my life. The camera, my supposed ally, seemed to be conspiring against me, confirming all of my worst fears. It seemed to prove Tom right about everything. Each night, after Tom and the kids were asleep, I would sneak downstairs with my laptop and review the day's recordings, and I would watch, in horrified, high-definition clarity. As I lived out the narrative he had written for me, I watched myself walk into the house, my arms full of groceries, and absent-mindedly tuck my phone into the magazine rack while I sorted the mail. I saw myself. On a busy morning, place my wallet on top of the refrigerator while I was packing the kids' lunches. I saw myself, distracted by a phone call. Leave my keys on the kitchen counter instead of putting them in the bowl by the door. It was all there, a painful, undeniable video diary of my own incompetence. The worst part was watching the searches. I'd see myself, a frantic, wild-eyed woman, tearing the house apart, searching for something that was often right in front of my face. And then I'd see Tom, my patient, long-suffering husband, calmly walk over and retrieve the item from the exact place I had left it. The footage was a testament to his patience and my madness. A new, deep wave of shame and guilt washed over me. I had been wrong. I had been paranoid. I had suspected my wonderful, supportive husband of something monstrous, when the monster was, in fact, my own failing. Overworked brain. I felt like a terrible wife. I almost unplugged the camera, ready to throw it in the trash and apologize to him for ever doubting him. But I decided to watch one more clip. It was the footage from the day before, a day I had, once again, lost my phone. I watched myself put the phone down on the coffee table. I watched myself leave the room. Then, a few minutes later, I watched myself come back in, looking for it, the familiar panic already on my face. I watched myself search the entire living room, getting more and more frantic. And then I watched Tom enter the room. "What's wrong, honey?" his voice, a faint sound on the video, asked. I watched my video self-explain, my voice full of a desperate frustration. And then I saw it, a detail so small, so subtle, that I had to replay the video 3 times to be sure. As I was frantically searching under the sofa cushions, Tom, who was standing by the fireplace, pretending to look for the phone, glanced down. His eyes did not scan the room. They darted, for a fraction of a second, directly to the coffee table, right where the phone was sitting, partially obscured by a magazine. He didn't say anything. He let me continue my frantic, tearful search for another 5 full minutes. He let me reach the peak of my self-hating despair. And then, he walked over to the coffee table. "Oh, for heaven's sake, his voice on the recording said with a gentle, pitying sigh. "It's right here. You were looking right at it." He had known where it was the entire time. He had watched me have a panic attack, and he had let it happen. It wasn't definitive proof. It wasn't the smoking gun I was looking for, but it was a crack, a tiny hairline crack in the perfect, loving facade of my supportive husband. It was a moment of cruelty disguised as helplessness, and it was enough. I decided to keep the camera running. I was more confused, more on edge than ever before. Was I forgetful? Yes, the camera had proven that. But was he just patiently helping me, or was he enjoying it? Was he deliberately letting me suffer? The question was a terrifying one, and I knew with a new, chilling certainty that my silent little witness had a much bigger, much darker truth to reveal. The days after I saw my husband, Tom, knowingly let me search for my lost phone were a strange, tense tightrope walk. My reality was fractured, on one hand. The camera had confirmed my greatest fear. I was forgetful. I was leaving my things in strange places. But on the other hand, it had revealed a crack in his loving, supportive facade, a flicker of something that felt less like patience and more like quiet enjoyment of my distress. I was on high alert. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a psychological battlefield. And I was beginning to suspect I was the only one who didn't know the rules of engagement. I became meticulous, almost performative, in my actions, deeply conscious of the silent, unblinking witness on my bookshelf. I would place my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door and say it out loud to the empty room. "Okay, keys are in the bowl." I would plug my phone into the charger on the kitchen counter and announce, "Phone is now charging." I felt like I was building a case, creating an undeniable record of my own sanity for an audience of one me. The final, definitive proof came on a Thursday morning. It was another one of those hectic days. I had to drop our son, Ben, off at a friend's house for a play date, and then get to an important doctor's appointment across town. An appointment I had waited 3 months for. The schedule was tight. I could not be late. I went through my morning routine with the precision of a drill sergeant. Lunches were packed. Backpacks were by the door. At 8:15 a.m., I walked to the entryway table, my purse on my shoulder, ready to grab my keys from the bowl where I had, just 20 minutes earlier, placed them with deliberate care. They were gone. The bowl was empty. But this time, I didn't feel the familiar, hot wave of panic. I felt a strange, chilling calm, a quiet, terrifying certainty. Tom came out of the kitchen, a cup of coffee in his hand, his face a mask of concern. "What's wrong, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My keys," I said, my voice quiet, my eyes locked on his. "They're gone. I put them in the bowl." "Tom, I know I did." He sighed, that familiar, heavy, disappointed sound. "Oh, he said, shaking his head slowly. "Not again." "Okay, don't worry. Let's look. We'll find them." He launched into his usual routine, the performance of the concerned, helpful husband. He started looking in all the silly places. "Did you check the microwave? You put them in there once, remember. But this time, I didn't play my part. I didn't join in the frantic search. I just stood by the front door, my arms crossed, and I watched him." "You know what, Tom," I said, my voice interrupting his performance. "Don't worry about it. It's okay. I must have left my spare set in the glove compartment of the car. I'll just use those. I'm going to be late." This threw him off his script. My calmness, my lack of a frantic, tearful breakdown, clearly unnerved him. "Oh," he said, looking confused. "Okay, well, drive safe." I walked out the door, got my spare key from the glove box, and drove my son to his playdate. But I didn't go to my doctor's appointment. I drove to a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from my house. I sat down in a corner booth, pulled out my laptop, and logged into the Nanny Cam's live feed. My heart was pounding against my ribs. This was the moment of truth. I scrolled back through the morning's recordings. My hands were shaking. Timestamp 7:55 a.m. There I was. I watched myself walk to the entryway table, my keys in my hand. I watched myself clearly, deliberately, place the keys in the ceramic bowl. I could even see my lips move as I said to myself, "Keys are in the bowl." The relief was a physical thing. I wasn't crazy. Timestamp 8:03 a.m. The footage showed me in the kitchen with Ben, getting his breakfast. Timestamp 8:07 a.m. And then I saw him, Tom. He walked out of our bedroom, phone to his ear. He walked through the living room, glanced towards the kitchen where I was, and then he looked directly at the bookshelf, directly at the camera. He seemed to pause for a fraction of a second, a small, unreadable expression on his face. Then he continued his phone call, his back now to the camera, his movements casual. He walked over to the entryway table, and I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as he ended his call, looked around one more time to ensure he was alone, and then quickly, deliberately, plucked my keys out of the bowl. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a joke. It was a conscious, calculated act of sabotage. I watched, my blood turning to ice, as he walked over to the large, potted ficus tree in the corner of our living room. He knelt, pretending to inspect the leaves, and then, with a swift, furtive movement, he shoved my keys down deep into the soil, hiding them behind the plastic liner of the pot. He stood up, brushed the dirt from his hands, and walked back to the kitchen, a calm, pleasant smile on his face, calling out, "Everything okay in here, honey?" A few minutes later, the footage showed me coming out of the kitchen, ready to leave. I saw myself walk to the key bowl. I saw the look of confusion on my face. I saw the frantic search begin. And a few minutes after that, I saw Tom emerge from the kitchen, his face a perfect mask of loving concern. To help me, I closed my laptop, a single, hot tear of pure, undiluted rage rolling down my cheek. The validation wasn't a relief. It was a confirmation of a truth so monstrous, so intimate, that it felt like a betrayal of my own reality. He hadn't just been a condescending, unhelpful husband. He had been actively, maliciously, and systematically trying to make me believe I was going insane. He had been deliberately, cruelly, psychologically torturing me. The question was no longer, am I crazy? The question was now a much, much darker one. Why? Why would he do something so cruel? What was his endgame? It couldn't just be a sick, twisted power trip. It was too methodical, too consistent, hiding my keys, my phone. It was always about preventing me from leaving the house on time, or stranding me somewhere. It was about controlling my movements. But why? With a sense of dawning, sickening dread, I opened my laptop again. I didn't stop the video. I let it play. I had to see what happened next. I had to know what he was really doing. I sat in the quiet corner of the coffee shop, my laptop open, my world shattered. The video clip was only 3 minutes long, but I watched it over and over again, each viewing a fresh wave of nausea and a cold, clarifying rage. The evidence was undeniable, irrefutable. He wasn't just a condescending, unhelpful husband. He was my own personal saboteur. He was actively, deliberately, trying to make me believe I was going crazy. But the question, the one that was now screaming in the back of my mind, was why? What was the endgame? What kind of sick, twisted person derives pleasure from systematically tormenting his own wife, from making her doubt her own sanity? It wasn't about power, not entirely. It was too specific, too methodical. Hiding my keys, my phone. It was always about controlling my movements, preventing me from leaving the house on time, creating chaos and delays. But for what purpose? With a sense of dawning, sickening dread, I let the video play. I watched the footage continue from the moment he had planted the keys in the ficus tree. I watched him walk back into the kitchen. I watched myself, a frantic, wild-eyed version of me, rush into the living room and begin the desperate, humiliating search. I saw him emerge from the kitchen a few minutes later, his face a perfect mask of loving concern, and I watched his cruel, patient performance as he let me completely unravel. I saw myself collapse onto the sofa in tears. I saw him discover the keys on the mantelpiece. I saw myself snatch them from him and run out the door. A broken, humiliated mess. And then I saw what happened after I left. Tom stood in the living room for a long moment, a slow, smug, triumphant smile spreading across his face. He had won. He had broken me down, and he was savoring his victory. He picked up his own phone from the coffee table. He looked at it, and his smile widened. He typed a quick message. A few minutes passed. He just sat on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, looking completely relaxed. And then there was a soft knock on our front door. Not a loud, firm knock like a delivery person. A quiet, familiar, almost secretive knock. Tom jumped up from the sofa, his movements suddenly eager, excited. He practically ran to the door. He opened it. And a woman walked in? She was beautiful, in that effortless, confident way that I had always secretly envied. She was tall, blonde, and wearing an expensive-looking trench coat. I had never seen her before in my life. And my husband, my loving, supportive husband, didn't just greet her. He pulled her inside, and right there in our entryway, in the very spot where I had been on my hands and knees, frantically searching for my keys just 30 minutes earlier, he wrapped his arms around her and he kissed her. It was not a friendly kiss. It was a long, deep, passionate kiss, the kind you share with a lover, the kind he hadn't given me in years. I watched, my body completely frozen, my mind a screaming void of pure, white-hot disbelief. The nanny cam, my silent, unblinking witness, recorded it all in perfect, high-definition clarity. It recorded as he led her into our living room, as they fell onto our sofa, the sofa I had just been crying on, and began to kiss again, their hands all over each other. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The entire last year of my life, my forgetfulness, my incompetence, my madness. It all made a new, horrifying kind of sense. Hiding my keys wasn't just about making me feel crazy. It was a tool, a practical, logistical tool of his betrayal. He wasn't just gaslighting me for the sick pleasure of it. He was doing it to control my movements, to create windows of opportunity for his affair. The day of my big presentation, he had hidden my keys to ensure I would be late, flustered, and out of the house, so he could have her over without fear of me coming home early. The times my phone had gone missing, he had taken it so I couldn't call to say I was on my way home. He had been trapping me, orchestrating my schedule, my very reality, to facilitate his secret life. The concern, the patience, the pity, it was all a lie, a monstrous, intricate, and deeply cruel performance designed to cover up a betrayal so profound it almost stopped my heart. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had tried to make me believe I was insane so that he could do it more easily. The pain was so immense, so absolute. It was beyond tears. It was a cold, hard, physical weight in my chest. But as I sat there in that anonymous coffee shop, watching my husband cheat on me on my laptop screen, something else took over. The part of me that was a hospital administrator, the part that was a competent, organized, and ruthlessly efficient professional, came roaring back to life. My shock and pain were immediately channeled into a cold, clear, strategic focus. I needed evidence, undeniable, irrefutable evidence. I didn't stop the recording. I let it play. I watched them for another 20 minutes, my face a mask of stone, and then, my hand steady, I clicked save. I saved the entire video file, all 1 hour and 27 minutes of it. I backed it up to my secure cloud server. I emailed a password-protected copy to my own private email account, and then I sent another copy to my best friend, with the subject line, emergency, watch this. I am okay, but my marriage is over. I now had multiple, high-definition, undeniable copies of his betrayal. I closed my laptop. The tears were gone. The heartbroken, self-doubting wife was gone. I was still in my power suit from my meeting that morning, and I finally felt like I belonged in it again. He thought I was at a doctor's appointment. He thought I was a forgetful, incompetent mess who couldn't be trusted with her own keys. He had no idea that I had just watched his entire world of lies on a crystal-clear screen. He had no idea that I was now in possession of the one thing that would not just end our marriage, but would completely and totally dismantle his life. And he had no idea that I was now planning a special, private premiere of my new favorite video. Just for him. The next morning, I was a different woman. The anxious, self-doubting, and forgetful wife was gone. In her place was a calm, cold, and calculating stranger. I woke up before anyone else. I went through my morning routine with a chilling, quiet precision, and then I set the trap. I took my main set of car keys and deliberately, with a steady hand, placed them in the ceramic bowl by the front door. It was a silent dare. I was in the kitchen, making lunches for the kids, when Tom came out. Yawning, I waited. At precisely 8:15 a.m., the time when our usual morning chaos would begin. I walked to the front door. I looked at the empty bowl. "Oh, darn," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of my old, frantic self. "Tom, honey, have you seen my keys? I can't seem to find them anywhere." He turned from the coffee maker, and I saw that familiar, pitying look in his eyes. He had taken the bait. "Again, he sighed, shaking his head. "Okay, don't worry. We'll find them. Just retrace your steps." He launched into his final performance as the patient, supportive husband. He helped me look. He checked all the silly places, and I played along, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I let him perform his little one-act play of my incompetence one last time. Finally, after 5 minutes of this charade, he walked over to the bookshelf. "Well, what do you know?" he said with a chuckle, reaching behind a stack of books. "Here they are, you silly goose. You must have put them here last night." He dangled the keys in front of me, a triumphant, loving smile on his face. He was expecting me to thank him, to apologize for being so scatterbrained. But I didn't take the keys. "Wait," I said calmly. "Before I go, I have something to show you. It's a little home movie I put together. I think you'll find it interesting." He looked at me, a confused frown on his face. I picked up the TV remote from the coffee table. "Sit down, Tom," I said. My voice no longer the voice of his wife, but the voice of a CEO about to fire an underperforming employee. He sat, his confusion turning to a wary apprehension. I turned on our large, 65-inch living room television. I had the video file queued up on a USB drive. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and our living room was filled with the crystal clear, high-definition footage from the Nanny cam from yesterday morning. He watched, his face growing pale, as the video showed me, clear as day. Placing my keys in the ceramic bowl, he watched, his breathing becoming shallow, as the video showed him, his own face, walking over, looking around, and then quickly, furtively, taking the keys and shoving them into the soil of the potted ficus tree. And then he watched, his face a mask of pure, abject horror, as the video showed him opening our front door and pulling another woman into our home, into our life, kissing her with a passion he hadn't shown me in years. I let the entire, unedited video play. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word the camera's microphone had picked up. It was a silent, brutal, and undeniable execution. When the video ended, the screen went black, but the reflection in the dark screen showed the face of a man whose entire world had just been completely and totally annihilated. He was shaking, his face ashen, his eyes wide with the terror of a man who has been caught, exposed, and left with absolutely nowhere to hide. He started to stammer, to deny, to try and spin some wild, pathetic lie. That's not, I can explain. I stood up, I looked down at the shell of the man who had been my husband, and my voice was not angry. It was not tearful. It was just empty. "It turns out I'm not forgetful after all, Tom," I said quietly. "Just betrayed." I picked up my purse. "I've already sent a copy of that video to my lawyer," I added, my voice as cold as the grave. "She will be in touch with yours. I want you to pack a bag. I want you out of my house." I looked at him one last time. Now, the divorce was swift and clean. The video evidence was, as my lawyer so dryly put it, non-negotiable. He got nothing but his own clothes and the shame of his betrayal. It's been a year. The kids and I are thriving. I have a new, smaller home, one filled with light and laughter and none of his ghosts. I have a new key bowl by the front door, and I have never, not once, lost my keys. My ex-husband tried to make me believe I was crazy. He tried to gaslight me into doubting my own reality, all to cover up his own pathetic lies. But he made one crucial mistake. He didn't realize that in the age of technology, there is always a silent witness watching. That nanny cam didn't just give me proof of his affair. It gave me something far more precious. It gave me back my own mind. And that is a gift that no amount of gaslighting, no amount of lies, can ever take away from me again.